The Senate chamber was silent. Every eye was watching. Something was about to happen that no one would forget. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked slowly to the podium. Her steps were calm, but firm. You could almost feel the weight of every footstep echo through the room. Moments earlier, Senator Mitch McConnell had spoken. His words were sharp. He had called her unqualified. He had mocked her background as a lawyer. He believed she would stumble. He believed he would win this moment, but he didn't know what was coming. Cameras pointed toward the podium. Millions were watching the live broadcast. Jasmine Crockett straightened her papers. Her face showed no fear. This was not just a speech. It was about respect. It was about truth. It was about showing that experience does not always mean wisdom. Before we go deeper, make sure you stay with us until the end of this story. What happened next shook Washington to its core. McConnell leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He had that half smile that people in politics know so well, the smile that says, "I have already won." But Jasmine Crockett had a plan. She was not only a politician, she was a trial lawyer. She knew how to use facts like arrows, and she knew how to stay calm when others tried to shake her. She looked directly at McConnell. Her voice was steady. "Thank you for your comments. Senator," she began. Her tone was polite, but firm. Every sentence was clear, simple, and strong. Then she asked a question that froze the room. "Madam Speaker, is it proper for a senator to question another member's professional background without evidence?" The speaker hesitated. No, one expected that question. The rule book of Congress suddenly felt very small. McConnell leaned forward to defend himself. "I made no personal attack," he said. "I only pointed out the representative's limited understanding of the Constitution." Crockett nodded, as if she had prepared for this exact reply. That calm smile appeared again. "I appreciate the senator's concern," she said. "Since he brought up constitutional understanding, let's look at some examples." She reached down and lifted the first paper from her stack. The camera zoomed in. Everyone could see her notes. Neat, organized, ready. "In 2016, she began, Senator McConnell said that Supreme Court nominations should not move forward during an election year." She held up the transcript. "He said the American people should have a voice. That was his reason for blocking President Obama's nominee." A murmur spread through the chamber. Everyone remembered that moment in history. Then Crockett lifted another sheet. "But in 2020, during another election year, he did the opposite. He rushed through the nomination of Justice Amy Coney Barrett." She paused. "In law, Senator, we call that an inconsistent principle, and an inconsistent principle is not a principle at all." The room stirred. Even those who disagreed with her could not deny the clarity of her words. McConnell's smile began to fade. He took a sip of water, trying to hide his discomfort, but the cameras caught everything. His fingers tapped lightly on the desk. He knew he had just been cornered by logic. Jasmine Crockett kept going. Her voice was soft but filled with power. "Maybe the senator was talking about my experience as a lawyer," she said. "Well, let's look at that too." She lifted another document. "I have tried over 100 cases. I have argued before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. My constitutional arguments have been cited in real court opinions." She paused again. "I believe the senator practiced law for about 6 weeks before moving into politics." Gasps rippled through the chamber. A few lawmakers even smiled. Trying to hide their amusement, a Republican senator jumped up. "Point of order, Madam Speaker. This is personal." Crockett didn't flinch. "I'm simply answering questions about my qualifications," she said calmly. "But I'm happy to stay on the Constitution if that's preferred." The speaker nodded. "Please continue." "Representative Crockett," she placed another stack of papers on the podium. "I have prepared an analysis," she said. "It reviews 15 years of the senator's own statements about the Constitution." I found 17 times where his words contradicted each other. The room went quiet. 17 contradictions, even the air felt heavy. McConnell's face hardened. Famous poker expression returned, but there was a twitch near his eye, a sign he was under pressure. Would the senator prefer I review each contradiction? Crockett asked. Or only the top 3 that affected Supreme Court appointments? No one spoke. Everyone wanted to hear more. Even those on McConnell's side leaned in. McConnell tried to escape. Madam Speaker, he said quickly, we have a busy schedule today. Let's move on to our agenda. But Crockett wasn't finished. I'm happy to submit the full report, she said. Before that, let's talk about one more thing the senator mentioned, congressional immunity. She raised one last document. This is the brief I filed in Williams v. Texas Department of Criminal Justice. It helped create new constitutional protections for people facing the death penalty. Then looking straight at McConnell, she said, I didn't come to Congress for immunity. I came here to defend the same Constitution I defended in courtrooms across Texas. For a full 3 seconds, the room was silent. No coughs, no whispers, just silence. McConnell's eyes lowered. His expression was blank, for the first time in years. The master of Senate control had no words. And just when everyone thought it was over, Crockett delivered the line that would echo across America. Senator McConnell, she said softly, you've spent 40 years in this chamber, but time in office is not the same as dedication to principle. These papers, she lifted the stack, contain your own words, contradicting themselves again and again. The Constitution deserves better. The room erupted. Reporters began typing, phones lit up. The video clip would soon go viral. But the story wasn't finished, because what happened after this moment changed more than one senator's pride. It began to shake the balance of power in Congress itself. The silence that followed Jasmine Crockett's speech did not stay inside the Senate chamber. Within minutes, clips of her calm takedown filled television screens and social media feeds across the country. People in coffee shops, offices, and living rooms were replaying the moment again and again. Commentators called it the day truth walked into the room. Ordinary citizens just called it satisfying. By nightfall, every news outlet had a headline about the confrontation. Some praised her courage, some questioned her tone. But everyone agreed on one thing. The freshman representative had stood her ground. For many Americans watching at home, especially those who had spent decades feeling ignored by politics, her quiet strength felt refreshing. She spoke like someone who had worked for a living, not like someone who had memorized talking points. Across Washington, staffers whispered in hallways. Older lawmakers who had ruled by seniority for years were uneasy. They had seen new members come and go, but rarely had one changed the conversation so quickly. A senator was overheard saying, "If the young ones start doing their homework like that, we'd better watch our words." In offices and committee rooms, aides began digging through old transcripts, checking their own boss's past statements for contradictions. For Jasmine, the hours after her speech felt unreal. Her phone did not stop buzzing. Reporters wanted interviews. Supporters sent messages of thanks. Even a few quiet voices from the other party reached out with respect. Her chief of staff told her the office inbox had received more mail in one evening than in her entire campaign. Donations from small towns and suburbs poured in. Some messages came from retired teachers and veterans who wrote, "You made us believe again that truth can win." Still, Jasmine knew this wave of attention could turn at any time. Politics loved a new face, but it also loved to test that face until it cracked. She reminded her team to stay humble. "We won one argument," she said softly. "Now, we have to win people's trust." The next morning, headlines shifted from shock to analysis. Television panels compared her courtroom style to famous historical figures. A retired judge said on air, "That young woman argued like she was still in front of a jury." Even a conservative commentator admitted, "You can disagree with her politics, but you can't deny her command of facts. For once, the noise of partisan fighting was replaced by discussion about principles. Inside the Capitol, the senator she had challenged remained silent. He avoided cameras, letting spokespeople issue careful statements about respectful debate, yet everyone could sense that his authority had been shaken. A few of his allies hinted that it was time for new strategies when facing opponents. Trained in law or science rather than career politics, it was a quiet but historic shift. Knowledge was beginning to compete with seniority. Meanwhile, Jasmine prepared for the next session. She spent long nights in her office reading case files, studying the Constitution again line by line. She knew the cameras would return. She wanted to prove that her first victory was not luck, but skill and preparation. When her staff urged her to rest, she smiled. "I'll rest when I'm ready to argue the next case," she said. Beyond Washington, the public reaction grew stronger. Talk radio callers praised her calm tone. Older viewers, many in their 50s and 60s, said they finally understood a congressional debate without needing a dictionary. One caller told a host, "She talks like us. Straight, no fancy words." That simplicity made her more powerful than long speeches ever could. By the end of the week, universities invited her to speak about honesty in government. Law students quoted her lines about consistent principles. Her words, once spoken in a tense chamber, were now written on classroom whiteboards. It was as if the country had been waiting for someone to remind them that truth still mattered. Inside her heart, Jasmine knew this moment was bigger than personal pride. She thought about every young lawyer, teacher, or nurse who had ever been told to wait their turn. She had shown that doing your homework and speaking clearly could move mountains, but she also sensed a storm forming on the horizon. Power does not surrender easily, and the men who had ruled Washington for decades were already planning how to strike back. One evening, as the city lights flickered outside her window, Jasmine's aide handed her a printed memo. It was a leaked note from a senior senator's office, outlining ways to neutralize her growing influence. She read it slowly, then folded the paper. "They still don't understand," she said quietly. "This isn't about me. It's about accountability." She turned off the lamp, leaving the office in near darkness except for the city glow. Somewhere in another building, her opponents were doing the same, plotting, calculating, preparing. The confrontation on the Senate floor had ended, but the real battle for integrity in government was only beginning. And what happened next would test not just Jasmine Crockett's courage, but the conscience of the entire Capitol itself. Stay with us because next we'll show how one woman's calm truth turned into a movement that no one in power could stop. The conscience of the entire Capitol itself was now on trial. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine's speech became more than a viral moment. It became a mirror held up to power. People all over the country began asking the same question she had asked: who is keeping our leaders honest? At first, the old guard tried to ignore her. They believed that every story fades when the next scandal arrives. But this one didn't. Clips of her speech kept circulating. Her calm tone, her careful words, and the stack of papers on the podium became symbols of courage. Even late-night comedians quoted her lines about consistency and principle. Inside Washington, something subtle began to change. Staff members who had once kept quiet started to speak up in meetings. Reporters stopped chasing gossip and began comparing old voting. Records younger lawmakers started carrying small notebooks, filling them with facts instead of slogans. It was as if the city had taken a deep breath of cleaner air. Jasmine worked quietly through it all. She avoided grand speeches. Instead, she focused on simple actions, meeting with colleagues, answering letters from citizens, and helping write clearer laws. She told her team, "If we want to keep people's trust, we must stay transparent." Her words spread through offices and hallways, and those who disagreed with her politics began to respect her discipline. The senator she had challenged kept his distance. He still appeared on television, still gave interviews, but there was a new restraint in his voice. He chose his words carefully now, aware that every statement could be compared with the past. He had learned painfully that truth remembered is stronger than opinion repeated. Outside the Capitol, citizens formed study circles to read the Constitution together. Libraries held community nights where volunteers explained laws in plain English. People who had once felt politics was too complicated began to believe they could understand it. Again, one teacher in Ohio told her students, "See what one clear voice can do?" She asked for honesty. And now we're all listening. Donations to civic education. Programs doubled. A group of retired lawyers offered free workshops to help voters check facts before elections. Small towns organized truth forums where neighbors could question local officials directly. It was messy sometimes, loud sometimes, but it was real participation, the kind that democracy needs to stay alive. Jasmine often thought about the night she faced the senator. She remembered the silence, the weight of the moment, and how easily fear could have stopped her. Now, seeing people across the country finding their own voices, she realized that courage spreads faster than anger. When one person stands firm, others remember that they can, too. But success brought new pressure. Some colleagues warned her that popularity could fade. "Washington loves you now," one advisor said, "but they'll test you again." She smiled gently. "Then I'll be ready," she replied. She knew integrity wasn't a performance. It was a habit, a choice repeated every day. Months later, when another heated debate shook Congress, reporters once again turned their cameras toward her seat. Would she speak? Would she challenge the system again? Jasmine waited until the noise settled. Then she rose slowly, the same calm in her step as that first day. Her opening words were simple. Just 3 sentences. Truth doesn't wear out, principles don't expire, and courage, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. The chamber went quiet. Just as before, even her critics leaned forward to listen. She didn't attack anyone. She only asked questions, clear and fair. Each answer revealed how much people had learned since her first speech. The room felt different now, less like a battlefield, more like a courtroom of ideas. Outside, crowds gathered near the steps, listening on loudspeakers. Some held small homemade signs that read, "Consistency, courage." When Jasmine finished, they didn't cheer wildly. They simply applauded in steady rhythm, a sign of respect rather than excitement. For them, this was not entertainment. It was a reminder that democracy can still work when its members act with honesty. Later that evening, walking back to her office, Jasmine stopped by a window overlooking the city lights. Washington looked peaceful from above, almost quiet. She thought about the people watching from small towns, the ones who still believed that fairness could win, she whispered to herself. Maybe this is how change begins, not with shouting, but with steady truth. Her phone buzzed again. A message from her aide read, "Another group of young interns just signed up for our constitutional workshop." She smiled, closed her eyes for a moment, and breathed deeply. The movement she had started no longer belonged to her. It belonged to everyone who believed that honesty is strength. And as the night settled over the Capitol, one thought echoed louder than the city traffic below. When truth stands firm, power must learn to listen. The movement she had started no longer belonged to her. It belonged to everyone who believed that honesty is strength. And as the night settled over the Capitol, one thought echoed louder than the city traffic below. When truth stands firm, power must learn to listen. Weeks turned into months, and Jasmine's story became part of daily conversation. People didn't just remember her words. They began living them, at kitchen tables, in small businesses, and at community meetings. Americans started asking fairer questions and expecting clearer answers. Change was no longer something whispered about. It was something people practiced. Reporters called it the quiet revolution. It wasn't about parties or sides. It was about principles. It was about keeping promises, checking facts, and speaking plainly. The idea that had begun with one calm voice on a Senate floor had spread into the everyday language of citizens across the country. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Capitol dome, Jasmine walked out to the steps where she had once stood uncertain and nervous. Now, she looked across the city and smiled. She knew the work was far from finished, but she also knew something stronger than fear now lived in the hearts of millions. It was the courage to question, the courage to stay calm, the courage to tell the truth, even when it shakes the room. The cameras caught that moment, her standing alone, hands folded, watching the sunset. It was quiet, simple, and beautiful. No big speeches, no headlines, just a reminder that leadership can look like listening, and that's where her story leaves us. Not with a fight, but with a lesson. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. If this story inspired you, or if you still believe honesty can win in the end, take a second right now. Like this video. It tells the YouTube world that stories about truth and courage matter. Subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss the next story that shows how calm voices can change big things. Share this video with a friend who still believes that facts and fairness make us stronger. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being part of this growing community of clear voices and open minds. Stay hopeful, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.